Let's talk AL East and some wins thresholds. According to Pacoda, the Orioles will win the most in the division. But according to FanDuel, who say the Yankees are good for about 88.5, they say that the division title's in the Bronx and they're the shortest shot on the FanDuel betting board. Let's hear from four women who cover teams in that division for their thoughts on this year's AL East.
Thanks, guys. As we continue to celebrate Women's History Month, really a fun one for me here. Obviously, a little personal because we have some of the best women in the American League East. We'll start out with the New York Yankees and Laura Albanese, the sports writer for Newsday. With the Red Sox, we've got Jen McCaffrey. She's the Red Sox beat writer for The Athletic. And of course, with the Blue Jays, we have Julia Cruz. She's the co-host of Jays Talk Plus on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. I love, first and foremost, thank you guys for taking some time for us to get to chat about an upcoming, very exciting season. And we have to start with the team that ultimately saw their season end in the World Series. So we'll take it to Laura first with the Yankees. Things were looking really good for the Bombers, but now they suddenly have big holes to fill without Garrett Cole, without Luis Gil. What does that look like for them?
I mean, it couldn't have been a more disastrous spring training for them because in addition to losing Gil and Garrett Cole, you've also got Clark Schmidt starting the year on the IL. You don't have Giancarlo Stanton. You don't have DJ LeMahieu. So right now you're looking at a rotation that's going to be headlined by Max Fried, which is exactly why they signed him to that contract. But after that, it's Carlos Rodon, who had a little bit of a bounce back year last year, but not really that vintage White Sox Rodon that we know. And after you have Marcus Stroman, who was on the trade block just a few months ago, this is a pitcher that was relegated to the bullpen because of a poor second half. You've got to count on Carlos Carrasco, who's 38 years old. You're not quite sure what you're going to get from him. And then you kind of have a little bit of an unknown factor in Will Warren. Certainly, that's not what you expected when you were looking at this Yankees rotation.
We've watched them time and time again figure things out one way or another. It's going to be interesting to see if they can defend that dominance that they've had in the East. But we've got to take it to the rivals now with the Red Sox and Jen McCaffrey. And this has been the talk of the town, bringing in longtime third baseman Alex Bregman. He's got the Gold Glove, a 3-year, $120 million deal. But as everybody is aware, the last regime had Devers' homegrown product, and he's in the second year of a decade-long $300 million extension. We've watched the back and forth. Will he, won't he get reps at third base at all? And it's been interesting so far, but if he's healthy later in the season, Jen, do you see a platoon situation, or is this Bregman's spot now?
That's the biggest question, right? That's a big question hanging over the Red Sox season of what are they going to do with this position and where's it going to go from here? Alex Cora has kind of, I wouldn't say avoided the question all season, all spring training, but it's definitely been something that's hung over camp. Devers came into camp right after, Bregman signed and basically said third base is my position. I don't want a DH. He was very adamant about it and never got reps at third base because he was rehabbing both of his shoulders for injuries that he had ended last year with. So he spent all winter rehabbing these shoulders, building up in spring training, never got throwing reps in camp, and really only got into spring training games in the final 2 weeks. But he's ready to go as a DH. It's hard to imagine that he's going to be able to get third base reps in season. You know how the season goes of just where's he gonna, is he gonna do pregame reps there and then slide into a game? It's a tricky situation. Obviously, Bregman won a Gold Glove at the spot last year, and Bregman has said that he'd move over to second base, but now the Red Sox have said that they're going to be promoting one of their top infield prospects, Christian Campbell, to play second base. Campbell can slide to the outfield, but there's a lot of moving parts right now. And for now, Devers is the DH for the team.
I'm glad to not be a general manager. And talking about extensions and those big decisions, we'll take it north to Toronto with Julia Cruz, because this is a team everybody's been talking about. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., will he or won't he end up getting to stay in Toronto? Both sides have been very open telling their stories, but how do you keep a season from getting a little distracting amongst not just him, but also Bo Bichette looking for those extensions and trying to stay there when they've seen a market where they have had some battles trying to lure away top talent to want to come to Toronto?
Yeah, I think, Melanie, it starts with the understanding that pretty much everything that had to be said has been said, perhaps even more. If you think about the way that spring training went, Blue Jays front office has been pretty consistent in not negotiating contracts in season. There's also a reason why Vladdy himself put a deadline, the start of spring training as a deadline to even negotiate on these deals. It's to try to prevent these things from becoming distractions. Now, we also saw a ton of speculation, leaked figures, some interviews, and that did take away the focus from what was happening on the field during this spring. But it's if you look at Mark Shapiro's last statement on this, it's pretty categorical. He believes that the Blue Jays will re-sign or extend Vladimir Guerrero Jr., which gives you a pretty good indication. This is a man who's very, very careful with his words. He wouldn't say something like that without, I guess, any certainty or any indication that both sides are sort of on the same wavelength, if you will. And of course, winning is the most important factor in all of this, I would say. The Blue Jays string together some wins, tough schedule for them to start the year. But if they can string together some wins early on, then those distractions do become a little bit harder to seep in. If they get to the trade deadline looking like a middling team, maybe looking like potential sellers, that is a different story. And that is really when the distractions have the potential to get in the way.
Now I get to kick this one to myself, obviously representing the Orioles, but everybody discussing right now all of the young talent that finally came up, that farm system that's graduated, and what that window looks like and how important that it is for young players to have to click. And to that, I have to say it's of the utmost importance. It's really unfortunate that Gunnar Henderson is ultimately going to miss possibly the first week of the season, but more importantly, that he missed that time on the backfields in those spring training games, because what we saw last year was a young Jackson Holliday trying to adjust to a position that he hadn't played at second base. Gunnar and Jordan Westberg at third base, they're very familiar with each other. Likewise, with switching out Ramon Urias at third base, Jorge Mateo at shortstop. Those are all interchangeable pieces, but you look at the young kid here and continue to adjust to a new position, but also new teammates, their range, how they call the game. That's what you would have ultimately wanted to go forward. Now, someone who is completely familiar with the spotlight was Juan Soto. He went to the Yankees last year, made a big splash with them, and we'll take it back to Laura Albanese for this one, because now we have to look at what the pivot is like without Juan Soto, and if that's enough to keep them in the AL East contention, especially when you look at that fact the injury bug seems to be creeping back in.
It is going to be tough. The projections are pretty bullish on the Yankees. I mean, they do think that they have, I think, the fourth best offense in Major League Baseball, even without Juan Soto. But so much of it is reliant on Aaron Judge. And we've seen Aaron kind of go through these little spoons throughout the season and also kind of be bitten by the injury bug. So this is going to be a team that is going to be even more reliant on Judge offensively. In addition to that, you've got to hope that with Paul Goldschmidt, you get second half Paul Goldschmidt, not first half Paul Goldschmidt. He had the back issue last year, and that's probably what led to some of his offensive decline in the first half. Jazz Chisholm Jr. is going to be a great offensive weapon, most likely. Cody Bellinger, with his spray charts and that short porch in right field, I think you can probably see his home run numbers go up. And I feel like the big X factor here is going to be Jason Dominguez. We have been waiting on the Martian for so long, this elite five-tool player. But he was hurt, obviously, last year. And when he did get called up in September, he had a few struggles. That's not indicative of what he can do as a major league ball player. But the fact of the matter is that he's 22 years old, and until you can prove that you can do it, then you can't really rely on that. So yeah, the Yankees do have to hope that a few of the pieces kind of work out. They're gambling a little bit with this lineup that while it is deeper, is still going to be going to be missing Juan Soto. He's going to be missing that presence in the batter's box, what he was able to do in terms of protecting Judge, but also what he was able to do in terms of imparting knowledge onto other hitters. Because as we know, Soto is one of the most, I would say, scholarly offensive producers in the game right now. He really knows the strike zone. He really knows opposing pitching, and that does help everyone throughout the lineup 1 through 9.
Julia, as we finish with you here in the Blue Jays, a very veteran rotation. I mean, we've seen this. They're bringing out a couple of the older ones, but that's becoming a trend across the league for this season. They were kind of middle of the pack, though, in numbers last year. So this year, are the peripherals looking a little better for these guys?
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely room for improvement from what we saw last year. And when you're talking about a veteran rotation, especially, obviously, health is going to play a big factor, starting with Max Scherzer's thumb, which was one of the big topics in spring training. Just some soreness popping up for him around the 50 pitch mark. The Blue Jays right now feel comfortable enough with penciling him in for that third start of the season. So you kind of expect Scherzer to be ready, but it is going to be something that we're going to watch for pretty much all season long, or at the very least early on in the season. Someone like Kevin Gausman also, I guess, it draws your attention when it comes to health of the rotation. Last year, he had a little bit of a delayed start to the spring and was basically playing catch up all season long. He's still a very talented pitcher, so he finished with a 3.83 ERA, but you never saw quite the dominance of the Kevin Gausman that we had seen in the past in 2022 and 23, where he was missing bats, really racking up the strikeouts there. It was just a little bit of an off year for him. This year, he shows up. He's obviously getting his start on time. He's put on some good weight. He's missing bats again. He's racking up the strikeouts. And that all obviously bodes well for this rotation. Those are two really, really big pieces. And then you have guys like Jose Barrios and Chris Bassett, whose value lies precisely in just being available and pitching every 5 days for this team. As for that last spot in the rotation, that is where I would also single out a big difference between this year and last. We saw sort of a revolving door for the Blue Jays last year. We had Yariel Rodriguez make a few starts, and Alek Manoah, obviously, before he got injured. And Bowden Francis didn't really establish himself until a little bit later in the season. And especially after the Blue Jays dealt away Yusei Kikuchi, it became pretty clear that they lacked the depth to make this a solid five-man rotation, if you will. Well, this year, Francis is pretty locked into that number 5 spot. The Blue Jays have some options. Jake Bloss, who's a top prospect, could be waiting in the wings if necessary. Yariel Rodriguez is currently slated for a bullpen role, but he could come in and make a spot start if necessary. So it just seems like the depth is also in a better place than it was last year. And that should help the Blue Jays move up from the middling performance that we saw last year.
It's a division that doesn't really give any room for mistakes and fumbles along the way. And the fun part is, again, all of us being in the American League East, I get to see each of you so much this season. Laura Albanese, Jen McCaffrey, and Julia Cruz, thank you so much for shedding a little bit of light on what to expect from the AL East this season. It's going to be a really fun one.